It's time again this week. We get to visit with Nebraska Extension agricultural climatologist Al Dutcher. And Al, over the past week, absolutely gorgeous weather for our harvesters. Is that something we're going to see continue headed into this weekend and next week?
Well, I would say for the western two-thirds of the state, this looks like a fairly favorable forecast. The biggest concern is going to be across the northern tier of counties and then, of course, the eastern one quarter of the state. Those are the areas that look to be the most favorable position to see precipitation. And even with that being said, looking at the quantitative moisture precipitation forecast for the next 7 days, we're seeing just that area of northern Nebraska and eastern Nebraska being painted in the area between 1/4 and 1/2 inch total for the next 7-day period. And everybody else is essentially a trace amount to just around 1/4 of an inch. So we know that the summary of the precipitation is that it comes down to details. And the first system is moving through the state right now. We know that the cold front itself is situated across central Nebraska. To the west of there, we've got very strong northwest winds. To the east of there, we've got good, strong southerly to southwesterly winds ahead of the front. And the compression of these fronts has caused very windy conditions, and that will continue for the remainder of the day. The biggest question is how much moisture can we evac northward as this front moves into eastern Nebraska such that we can get enough moisture in the column to generate precipitation. And so the ultimate forecast right now really says at this point, most likely area of precipitation, if it does break out, will be in that area, essentially to the south and east of a line from Omaha, basically back to Fairbury. That looks like the best convergence zone, and even there it's a fairly weak convergence, and I wouldn't expect more than just some isolated pockets of light rainfall unless we can get some thunderstorms developing in some of that instability, and that would be very isolated in nature. Then as that system pushes to the east of us, we're not going to see much of a cool down with this system, from a day-to-day basis, probably looking at 5 to 7 degrees on average departure from highs on Saturday from today. More importantly, it looks like the winds are going to subside. We should have an excellent harvest day if you're not basically getting any precipitation that would slow you up. And then on Sunday, we look at another more aggressive system crossing the north or beginning to cross the northern plains. And it looks like the models want to increase the moisture here in Nebraska, particularly Saturday or Sunday night into Monday. And once again, it looks like the vast majority of the moisture will be across the Dakotas, Minnesota, and the most likely area for significant moisture will be in that northern tier of counties. And also in eastern Nebraska, which may get some warm front formation, and we see some thunderstorms along that front of that thunderstorms, and they intensify as they go to the east of us. So that really is that area again. The eastern two-tier counties has this best chance for that type of precipitation. Everybody to the south and the west of there looks to be more in the dry sector of this storm as it really punches across the northern plains, and it wouldn't surprise me that we don't see hardly anything if much more than a couple sprinkles here and there. And then we get into a very strong northwesterly flow as this system really intensifies over the central and eastern Corn Belt and pulls some significantly cool air down into the region. So we should see a broad general cool down as we get from Wednesday through early next weekend, before we turn our attention to the ridge in the west, starting to push into the region and bringing a general warming trend. As it does so, there may be some upslope flow precipitation, particularly in the southern panhandle and the southwest as we go into next weekend. But at this point, I wouldn't hold my hopes on for a lot of precipitation. But bottom line, the warmth returns, high pressure establishes itself, and the next robust system that comes into the northern Rockies looks to be around the 27th to 28th of October. And the models are all over the place with this system. So we'll watch it closely to see whether or not it does form some significant weather impacts across the northern plains. But what it does do is shows a much stronger cold pattern coming into our region and intensifying over the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. So we'll be getting that dry Arctic type air, which means dry down will be very rapid in those type of situations, and it really scours the atmosphere out of moisture. And really, I don't see any major pressing major storm system entering our region if the 27th fails until we get into the first full weekend of November at the earliest. So by that time, based on what we're seeing here, if we can escape these next 3 or 4 days with a minimal amount of precipitation, we should have a lot of this corn crop and soybean crop pretty much wrapped up before we get into the month of November. This is looking like a very, very promising forecast for most of our Nebraska producers.
Thanks, Al. Nebraska Extension agricultural climatologist Al Dutcher. You're listening to the Rural Radio Network.